Welcome back and welcome home. Today's talk and future talks will be shifting in energy and shifting in their direction. I've been taking time, a lot of time, to find my footing again back into the realm of podcasting and stepping into myself. And I spent a lot of this time just questioning where my voice belongs and if it has a rightful place on this platform. And I've come to discover that passion and play always have their rightful place in our lives. This journey on earth that we're on is all about passion and play. What are we passionate about and what brings us joy? It seems really cliche, but all the rest seems to fall into place. But the hardest part can sometimes be discovering what our passion is and what brings us joy, and then remembering that it is our human right to deserve these things. We don't need to earn them. They are innately ours. I was just reflecting a lot during this time and refinding my footing and almost rediscovering my voice, because I felt really confident in my voice when I first started this, or at least I thought I felt confident. I felt confident enough to embark on this feat. And now, through this reflection, it just felt like a natural time to reflect on what I've created and how I got here, and what it means to me, where I want to go, and what it means for us. On that regard, I felt like I was trying to convince myself that I didn't deserve this, that my voice was not as important as I made it seem in my head. And then I remembered why and how I started. I came back to my own why. I found that this space started for me as a place for me to really capture my own journey as an audio diary. And I mean, what a beautiful place to be. I highly recommend it for anyone who enjoys expression in this way. But as I've grown and learned throughout this past year, I'm discovering that maybe I desire a little bit more from this, and maybe that's okay. I had to get past my own guilt and shame just to get to a place where I felt worthy of putting in more time and effort into a passion project. It was so easy for me to guilt myself for spending time on something that in a traditional sense served no quote-unquote purpose, because I'm not monetizing this, and it's not like anyone is looking to me for answers. I'm simply just doing this to fuel my own drive. And it took me some time to finally let myself believe that that in itself was more than enough, and it was okay. And that in itself is actually some part of it is more important than the monetization part, or the part that is deemingly more purposeful, because there's something really powerful in working towards something that is purely driven by passion and purely life-giving to you, even if there is no physical or tangible reward in sense of money or fame or any of those things. Like, it's really just something that I put time into, and my mind and body and soul appreciate the fact that I'm choosing to show up for myself in that way. I learned that I deserve to work hard at something simply because I want to, and there are no ulterior motives, just the driving force that this is a place I want to be. But all that being said, consistency has proven difficult for me, especially as I've taken on more for myself in the recent months than I had in the past year when I originally had started this. I finally found myself in a self-talk, getting real and honest with myself, that I can't show up here once a week anymore. I don't have that time or spaciousness, and that is completely okay. And in the fashion of change, what I really want is longer, more fleshed out episodes with so much space for me to go deeper and dive further into the topics that I choose to talk and express about. I feel like my rhythm is changing, and I kept trying to deny this when I was creating in the past month, and this led me to continuing down a path of self-denial. And I was telling myself that I was overwhelmed, I couldn't manage my time, I couldn't handle more than one thing at a time, etc., etc. But in truth, I just needed to let change come through and do her thing. Spark change, weed your garden, and let the flowers bloom. I couldn't keep up with the expectation I was setting, and I kept crumbling under that expectation and just ignoring it instead of realizing that I can change the expectation, rewrite the narrative, and begin to show up for myself again in the ways that I originally promised. Sometimes I think it's all just about looking at what the expectation is, and if it's completely out of our reach, then just change the expectation, because otherwise things get so overwhelming, just the idea of it, because you know that you're not going to meet that expectation anyway. So what's the point of setting something so high that you're not going to reach and then guilting yourself for not reaching an expectation that was never even possible? So I move forward in this space with intention and integrity, two valuable pieces that I have learned a fair bit of in the past few months. I want to be here and fully be here, and that means rewriting what that means for me. So once a month, I will come to you and to this space with a deep, long, fleshed out episode with a clearer path to set out on the first of every month, as a place to reflect on the month we completed together and look forward at the month ahead of us. I'm not sure if I've spoken on this before, but also I am attending an intensive herb school in person and really diving deep on the powers of plants and plant medicine. And my studies have really been integrating so deeply into my life. It actually feels like it is my life now, because it kind of is, but I can't help but weave the plants into everything that I do. And this place is no different. In fact, this space is, I feel like it's really perfect for that. So I will be weaving plant medicine into these talks here and there. Every episode, I would love to support with an herb that I believe supports the energy of the talk and cultivates the energy of the episode's container. I feel really rooted into this new energy flow, into this new rhythm that I'm stepping into with myself. And I think it is a place where I can meet myself where I'm at and feel really good about it. As much as I would love to be here on the weekly basis that I set out to be on, it's just not realistic. And part of what we are talking about today is expectation. And like I said, I set myself up to fail. I set the expectation for me to show up every week. And the thought of it overwhelmed me so much to the point that I didn't show up at all. And I failed myself, because this is something that is so important to me. And I let myself down by putting it deep on the back burner and letting it go up in the flames of neglect. But it's not too late to return to this. And I'm here now, and I'm choosing to show up for myself. And I'm grateful, and I'm very much looking forward to showing up in this new way. Last episode was all about fresh starts and new beginnings. And now I feel like that energy has really sunk in. And this is where we go. I feel that spring has really put into play everything that I set out for. And it's really pushed me, and I felt myself planting a lot of seeds. And I really felt the energy of the sun carrying me through and waking me up from these winter months and telling me that it's time to grow. So now that all of this energy has sunk in and we are very close to summer, I just feel like this is the perfect time to settle into this new rhythm and let the energy flow. So before we set out on today's journey, let's start as we always do with a deep breath in and out. Where does a conversation about boundaries begin and end? Isn't it an ironic thing, having boundaries for your boundaries? Somehow in the past 2 months of my life, the conversation of boundaries has come up more than it has in my entirety of living. But I'm happy that this conversation is opening up for myself and others around me sooner rather than later. And it's a conversation that I can't believe I haven't been having more openly with myself. But I think without naming it, I've spent a lot of life trying to set boundaries with others and trying to set them with myself. But it's a hard dance to dance, and it's even harder to find this balance without questioning yourself or hurting those around you. Boundary setting really is a skill that we are not so explicitly taught, but it is a vital piece to our survival and to our emotional and physical and mental well-being. I've learned that being able to set boundaries around your time, around your space, around your energy, and around your physical body can save you from so much mental turmoil and physical hurt, and can really save you from situations that you don't want to find yourself in. The conversation of boundaries is not an easy one to have, and it can be even more difficult to implement those boundaries after the fact. So before I introduce our boundary supportive herb, I want to open up this conversation with one very important concept and phrase, which is your sacred no. What it is, how to honor it, and how to invite it into your life in a safe and supportive way. Your sacred no belongs to you. It is entirely yours, and it is a big piece of yourself that you are allowed at any point to use. Your sacred no is ultimately about stepping into yourself and understanding what you truly want to say yes to and what you truly want to say no to. It's sacred because it deserves to be honored and heard and not disrespected in any way. And what makes it so difficult is that it is entirely ours and fully under our own control. So when we don't respect or honor this no, we are crossing our own boundaries and letting ourselves down. And just as important as honoring your own sacred no is honoring the sacred no of others. Because I think the best way to honor something for yourself is to honor it in others too, and really see how much of the same that we really are. When someone else is implementing their sacred no and you see it and you hear it, honor it and validate it for them. Because then the next time that you need to implement your sacred no, you will pay attention to how you want to be treated in that situation and know how you stepped up for others in situations like that when they are implementing their sacred no and you showed up for them. And it makes it easier for you to choose to honor your own sacred no because you did it for them and you knew how easy it was. And you felt how you could easily honor it and validate it for them and not make them feel bad and know that they shouldn't feel bad. And so you can expect the same from others as well for your own no. So many of us have never been taught how to use our sacred no to protect ourselves, let alone taught the concept that we have this no innately, and it is ours to use at any time. This makes it a really difficult concept to learn, especially when we have collectively been taught to be agreeable or to go with what's best for the crowd and to just ignore what you want for the sake of someone else. There is a time to be a martyr, there is a time to sacrifice, and there is a time to be selfless. But I really feel like the lines really got blurred, and we've become, at least some people, or there is some sort of energy that has become agreeable, just collectively, where we all just became agreeable and we have a hard time saying no. We have a hard time putting ourselves first because we don't want to be seen as selfish. We don't want to be seen as that person that only cares about ourselves. But when you really reel it all back, your sacred no is not just about you. It's about honoring yourself so that you can show up in the best way possible for others. But we'll get to that. I think when it comes to setting boundaries, your sacred no is the perfect place to start and to set the groundwork. It's more than just a word. It is a feeling that you are allowing yourself to embody. You allow yourself the freedom to question what you actually want. You allow yourself to ask yourself, do you want to go out? Do you want to stay in? Do you want to engage in this conversation? Do you want to be agreeable, or are you doing it for the sake of someone else's feelings? Are you staying true to who you are in this moment? Are you abandoning yourself? Your sacred no gives you the freedom to explore within yourself before feeling that you have to just outrightly give all of yourself to everyone in the most agreeable and palatable way, so you're not seen as a monster. Your sacred no gives you the permission that you need to look to yourself first for the answer, rather than staying quiet and looking around you and seeing what everyone else wants. It gets pushed aside. It's unfortunate to think that we even need that permission, because we shouldn't need the permission. It should be more simple than this. But I think as humans, it's just part of our learning process. It's part of how we learn in social settings, because you want to be considerate. You want to be aware of others. But it's part of the learning process to learn about what's truly you and what's not you. Have there been times where you crossed your own boundaries for someone else? Have you been honoring yourself? Do you stay true to yourself and your needs? Or maybe on the other end of the spectrum, do you hide behind your no and never say yes out of the fear for growth? Or do you constantly say yes out of the fear of rejection? This is a place to explore and to question and to lay the groundwork for being so rooted in yourself that you know the power of your yes, the power of your no, and the power of knowing when to use which. And on this note, I want to introduce us all to our sweet herbal ally, yarrow. I prefaced this before, but I have been attending herb school and been receiving the most beautiful education and learning of the plants and meeting the plants and just really meeting them on this very deep level, medicinally and energetically, and just meeting them, period. Weaving their power into our self-talks with each other is a way to spread their roots even further into our lives, and especially into mine. I'm really empowering myself to implement my herbal knowledge, which I feel like at this point is so limited, but I'm trying to remember that that is just a mindset, and you never stop learning. There is no limit to what you can learn. So even though I feel so like I'm just at such the beginning stages of this education, I still want to feel empowered to speak about these incredible allies that we have. And they're really just our friends. They are all really like cool friends and mentors that I want you to meet. And I feel like I am hosting them on my podcast and speaking for the plants in the ways that they have spoken to me. So when it comes to boundaries, yarrow is an ally that you want to have. The energy within this one is so powerful and bountiful. So a little bit about today's friend, yarrow, Achillea millefolium, in the Latin name. Yarrow is a very drought-resistant plant and thrives in hot, dry climates, yet grows abundantly, especially all over the U.S., and can sometimes be invasive, which is ironic for a plant that teaches us about boundaries. Yarrow medicinally can be used to stop bleeding, making her a wonderful first aid ally if you have a cut or a wound. Yarrow soothes cramps and relaxes the uterus and pelvic muscle and can help bring on bleeding, which was something that I learned recently. Traditionally, yarrow is used by natives to repel insects by rubbing the plant onto the skin or hanging on the doors as a repellent. So these are just some baseline uses, and just so you can learn a little bit about how this plant weaves into our lives and just a little bit about who she is. There are so many more amazing abilities of yarrow, and yarrow really is a friend that you want to have. But on an energetic level, I bring yarrow into this conversation because she has this affinity to help us set boundaries and protect ourselves. On the physical plane, yarrow will help close wounds, like I mentioned. And so think of it this way. If you have a cut and you put some yarrow on the cut and it helps to close the wound, it's basically closing the barrier of entry between our skin and the outside world. Because think about when you have a cut, you are so vulnerable. You are so exposed. Your insides are meeting this outside that is completely protected by our skin at all times. And yarrow comes in and helps to create that barrier that has been lost. So it's no coincidence then that yarrow also helps us create those barriers between ourselves and others. So on a more energetic level, thinking about your aura or your auric field, I feel like yarrow really strengthens the shield that we can build around ourselves, or can really strengthen our auric field. Something that we will talk about more next episode, which I've been planning out and I'm really excited about. But women have this incredible gift that when women or people who bleed, when we are bleeding, our auric field will extend, I think it's 6 feet beyond us in order to protect us. It's really what it's for, is to protect us when we're bleeding. But it can be, and it can feel very intrusive, because when you're bleeding, you feel very susceptible to everyone's energy, and it can hurt. It can hurt, and it can feel loud and crowded, and it just feels like everyone is just so close to you. So yarrow around that time is especially helpful to help you create those barriers and to help you create that distance and shield yourself. But even when you're not bleeding, there are so many times in our lives when we need to create barriers, and we need to set these boundaries and just make it very clear that there are certain things that we will not allow in, and that's completely okay. Yarrow energetically balances yin and yang and is thought to bring together heaven and earth. So there is this very sweet aspect of coming together in a way that feels balanced rather than thrown off. So if you find yourself not knowing where your energy starts and another person's begins, If you're constantly in a state of feeling swept up and consumed by others, yarrow can be your friend. Or if you're a person who lives in fear of letting your guard down, maybe you can have, or maybe you have an unhealthy balance of boundaries and can never let anyone in because of that fear. I would just highly recommend to carry yarrow with you, work with her, meet her, and let her be your medicine. Boundaries are really difficult. The best place to start with boundaries is always with yourself. So before setting boundaries with others, it's important to tune into yourself and meet yourself where you're at. I sometimes find this to be the most difficult part because choosing to set boundaries with others really starts with yourself and having that conversation with yourself. Am I falling short with myself because I'm too permeable to others, creating too much space with others and not leaving anything for me? Starting there can be a good vantage point before diving into boundary setting in the workplace, in relationships, friendships, whatever it may be. I feel like when you start with yourself, it just gives you a clearer sense of where you stand, because it can feel confusing when you bring something up to someone else and they're telling you how they feel about it, and you've never really stopped to think, well, how do I actually feel about this? Where do I stand on this subject? Where do my boundaries lie? Where do I want them to lie? Where do they lie within myself? Taking that first step to be the one to say, I feel like my boundaries are weak. How can I first be the one to reset them with myself and then begin to work my way out? Maybe start with a friend, maybe start with a boss. You can start with yourself first, and then that gives you the clearer groundwork to say, okay, my boundaries are set. Like, I'm good here. Now I can begin to work with others. Because it's hard to work with others first before you start with yourself. So when it comes to relationships or social settings, boundaries can act like a shield that you cover yourself with, like a bubble where you decide blatantly to keep certain things away from you, like unwanted physical touch or unwanted behavior or unwanted emotions from others. The shield can be as strong as you need it to be, and it's actually more effective than you might think. Taking the time before entering a conversation or a social setting to be very clear with yourself and create this metaphorical, but it's also very physical, shield around you by just tapping in and telling your mind and body what you will not allow through. So this boundary type is much more clear. It's a lot more black and white because you're having that moment with yourself. You're creating that barrier. You are imagining that it's going out beyond you. And it's just completely protecting you from this outside world and what you might not want to take in. And in this moment, you can also allow yourself to make note of what you do want to invite in. Boundaries don't always have to be blocking everything out. I feel like the word has more of a connotation of repelling, which I could understand why, because it is a lot of repelling. But in this moment when you're creating the shield, you can kind of pick and choose, like this I don't want in, but this is okay. Just kind of like you're hosting a party and you're thinking about what guests you want to invite and what guests you don't want to invite. So thinking about it in that way before you step into these social settings, having that moment, dropping in with yourself, and just maybe taking a deep breath and saying, okay, this I don't want, this I do want, this is what I will receive, this is what I will reflect. And then your body just has a natural way of intuitively knowing when you're in a situation where you're like, oh, this is red flag, like this is what I said I didn't want, so now I'm going to walk away. Or maybe it's a green flag and your body is recognizing something as, oh, we said we wanted this. Remember, when we were sitting in our car and taking that deep breath, and you said that this is what you wanted, so you should probably stay here. It's it's a simple practice that you can implement, and it's completely based off of you and that moment that you're having with yourself. So it's really nice because it's not even a conversation that you have to have with anyone. It's not crossing anyone else's boundaries. It's simply just creating that shield for yourself as the kind of like the first line of protection, that first barrier. Other boundaries can be more like an act of letting go and releasing what is not really yours and what you don't want to carry. So this type can be a bit more difficult, especially when you find yourself in friendships where you are an anchor. Of course, in our relationships, there is never a perfect balance. Sometimes you give 20 and they give 80, and sometimes vice versa. But I have found myself in some friendships or relationships where I'm always giving 80 and I'm always tired. And this exhaustion leads me to an unhealthy place with myself where I've taken on way more than I'm comfortable with. And in these situations, I remind myself to give myself grace, doing the best I can, and I can always choose to let go. And it's a difficult conversation, but well worth it. And it's important to note in these situations that the other person is not to blame. If you're in a situation where you feel like you're giving 80 and they're giving 20, it can be easy to set yourself up as the hero and the other person as the villain because you feel like they're feeding off of you. But taking the time to understand that we are all human, they are not to blame in this situation because no one's to blame. It's really just a matter of you not stating your boundaries and them not realizing it. So they're overstepping and they are taking a little bit too much from you, but you never reinstated that was happening. And it just started happening. So no one's at fault is basically what I'm trying to say. But it can feel a little bit difficult. It can sometimes feel like, how are they not aware? How are they not aware that I am exhausted, that they are draining me? And the reason I speak to this is because I feel like I've been in those situations where I just constantly feel like I'm being drained. And then it took me a little bit of time to realize you can't go about this world thinking that everyone else is just a battery drainer and you are some holy ball of light. It just really doesn't work like that, because I know that for myself in situations, I am the person that is leaning on someone else to the point where they fall over. Hopefully not, but I think it's safe to assume that we've all been on both sides of the spectrum, and this is why boundaries are important, so that when someone's crossing your boundaries, you can tell them, and then when you're crossing someone's boundaries, they can tell you, and we can all find ourselves in much safer mental spaces than we were before. When this is happening, though, I try to open the conversation with vulnerability, letting the other person know that I'm feeling fearful or abandoned or exhausted. Then I can express to them better why I need these boundaries to come into place and how they can meet me there. I think it can be easy to step into a conversation coming from a place of anger or resentment, but we are all a little bit hurt here. When you express your boundary, you make it very clear, and how they react is not up to you. If they choose to cross your boundary in this moment, then it is a different conversation depending on the state of the relationship. Maybe it won't be a conversation at all. But bringing vulnerability to the table can only help soften the hard edges that this conversation brings on. I have retrained myself to understand that I don't have to be cold or stoic or far removed in order to protect myself. I don't have to be that way in order to implement boundaries. I can be soft and vulnerable and understanding whilst staying true to myself. It's really all about just really remaining very rooted in yourself, especially when bringing up the conversation to other people, letting them know that you're feeling the way that you're feeling, not because of them, but because you haven't stepped forward and you haven't laid down the boundaries and they have triggered you in some sort of way. The last piece here is agreeability. It's a lesson I learn again and again and again. And I've noticed myself meet this lesson in many different lights and many different scenarios. A boundary for me is that I will not conform or abandon myself in order to be agreeable. But it's a lot easier than you think to abandon yourself. And it is scary. To me, abandoning myself is crossing a boundary that I sometimes don't even know how to come back from. But it happens so fast. In an instant, you're in a group setting and everyone is feeling really strongly about one thing. And oh, how easy it is to go along with it and to be agreeable and to be palatable. But then afterwards, you feel like crap. I had to have the conversation with myself after these moments that I am not here as in this social setting or here on a bigger level on this earth to be agreeable. And I don't have to be agreeable in order to be compassionate. I can listen, I can understand, I can be a safe space for you to go to, all while remaining true to myself. That doesn't always mean being agreeable. I think there was like a little bit of fear in not being, I guess, agreeable to others. And there's some sort of aspect of people pleasing because I want people to feel heard. I feel like it's a big part of my mission is that I want people to feel heard and to feel validated. But that's a tricky place to be when you are also a person who wants to stand true to who they are and what you believe in and the morals and the values that you have. So for me, I really had to have this conversation over and over again that I can still be understanding and I can still hold space and understand and allow people to be validated, but I don't have to agree. I don't have to be agreeable. I don't have to completely shut off and appease to them because that's completely going against everything I believe in because I just abandoned myself in order to make someone else feel good. So that's not even showing up truly or authentically. And that's why for me, it is a very scary place to be in that space of feeling like you've just abandoned yourself. So a good mantra to add to your tool belt is I listen to understand. I listen to understand. I listen to understand. I don't listen to conform. I don't listen to agree. Listen to the feelings you get in your gut. If something feels wrong to you, then it's most likely wrong. And if you get that feeling after you've said or partaken in something, you may have just crossed your own boundary. And is it worth it? Is that feeling of abandonment to yourself worth the 2 seconds of feeling accepted? It's a false feeling of acceptance too, because you're not showing up authentically. You're actually lying to everyone because you're not being true to yourself in that moment. So there is no authenticity there. It's not true acceptance because they're not accepting you for who you truly are because they can't do that unless you show up as who you truly are. Maybe in the moment it feels worth it, but it creates a falsehood that is hard to live by. I honestly shocked myself a little bit when I sensed that I was maybe in these situations that didn't feel right. Typically, my boundaries are so clear and so strong, but then I began to understand why. I needed to undergo this to realize that maybe my boundaries were a little bit too strong out of fear. And I realized this because I realized I wasn't even putting myself in enough situations to get my boundaries crossed, because I would just cut everything out in order to reduce the amount of situations in which I would need to step up and state my boundaries. And that's not really a safe place to be in either, because then you lose the muscle, you lose that boundary stating muscle. I will always protect myself, and I've found that limiting the situations where I might have to reinforce my boundaries was the easiest way for me to do that. But if I'm not exercising the boundary muscle and I'm just avoiding it, then in essence, I'm avoiding confronting myself. I'm avoiding doing something hard. I'm avoiding doing something difficult and scary. It's just not really helping anyone, because it's inevitable. I'm going to find myself in situations, as we all are, where we need to state our boundaries and we need to get clear and get real about who we are. And it requires us to be vulnerable, and it requires us to face a little bit of judgment, face the fear of judgment. And that's what I learned in these situations. When I'm not exercising the muscle, it actually gets pretty difficult to state boundaries. I forget my why. I forget why I don't conform. I forget why I don't like to be agreeable. And I'll find myself in a situation where I'm agreeable. And then I hate myself for it, because I don't want to be agreeable. I want to listen, I want to understand, and I want to be exactly who I am in that moment, all in the same second. And it's completely possible. But my boundary building muscle feels a lot stronger now. And I feel more empowered and more rooted in myself. And that is a feeling worth fighting for. And that's what I feel like that part of the journey that was very uncomfortable for quite some time was really about, was reminding me that the muscle needs to be exercised in order for it to be strong. And then I can feel very confident about any situation that I'm in, because I know that no matter what, I will state my boundaries and I will stay true to who I am. Everything in the aftermath of my boundary setting feels clearer and much more freeing. I was very vulnerable with myself and with others in those situations. I advocated for what I needed. And in that, I understood myself on a deeper level, really strengthened my relationship with myself. I further understood what I needed from my own vitality and for my own life force to feel really strong. It feels really good to show up for yourself in that way, to be the one to put your foot down and say, hey, this isn't working for me. I need to speak up for myself. And I think the people in your life, if they love you and truly respect you, they will be receptive to it. That doesn't mean the conversations will always be easy, but they will be receptive to it. I would like to say they should be, but I can't speak for everyone, and I can't speak for any relationship. It would be nice to think that, everyone should be receptive, but that's not always the case, because there are always underlying fears and traumas behind everything. So we can't exactly say that they should be receptive, but I think, put a little bit more faith in people and trust that if you agree to show up as yourself, then that's the most that you can do. In this boundary building period of my life, I strengthened my relationship with myself and also strengthened my relationship with others, because they now have a clearer understanding of who I am. And there is a mutual respect that we've built there. There is something so powerful and admirable about someone just owning their own shit and being real about what it means to be them. It takes a lot of courage and a lot of self-understanding to get to a place with yourself where you can step back and say, hey, I abandoned myself here. I need more of this. I need less of this. I want to be better for me so I can be better for you. I think it's really selfless. Boundaries are brave. And those who get angry or upset with you for setting boundaries, those are the people you need to be setting boundaries for. Because a lack of boundaries invites a lack of respect. It feels so invigorating to me to honor myself. And I find that when I do, I am actually more compassionate with others. Some boundaries need to be spoken. Others are felt and understood. And all of them are important. It all comes back to our sacred no. A simple no can be the very thing that we need to come back to ourselves. A simple no can be our medicine. It creates more space for our yeses to feel so much more exciting and life-giving. A yes to everything could very well be a no to yourself. And how do we exist in this world without our true selves? A no truly can be our medicine. Learn them, practice them, respect them. This month ahead of us is going to be so life-giving as we approach the summer solstice. We're going to have overall more energy and more of our life force to be in commune with others and with the world. So where do you want this energy to go? What are you trying to nurture? What are you growing in this time of fullness? This can be a really good time to remember where you've been, where the winter season took you, and what you let go of, and what are you looking forward to? Where are you going in this summer season? And I guess it can be a good time to begin with the end in mind. Think about what you want to accomplish or what it is that you want to feel by the end of this summer season. What do you want to see in bloom? Use your breath as a place to go with your boundaries. When you breathe in, accept only what you are willing to. And when you breathe out, release everything you no longer want to hold or let into your life. Thank you so much for being with me, and I hope you have a wonderful month. I'll talk to you soon.